Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jason Githens, Principal Group Product Manager on the Intune team. Been doing this for about 15 years, 16 years actually now. Config Manager, Intune, MIM, Intune. I just stay in touch with the branding that we adapt to on a somewhat annual basis. The topic today, managing Azure AD and hybrid join Windows clients, presenting with Susan. Want to do a quick introduction?
Sure. I'm Susan Taylor. I am a program manager on the Intune customer acceleration team. So I do work with customers to help them deploy Intune in their environments.
Cool. Thanks, Susan. And I realize, look at the title, it's probably an indicator of the complexity of this topic if the title itself is that complicated to even say. So what we're going to try to do here, actually, do you want to introduce the chat piece?
Sure. And we have some of our teammates online as SMEs to help answer questions. So if you do have questions during the session, please use the QR code to join the public chat, and they will answer any questions as we go.
Thank you. So the agenda is identity and management are so interrelated. Now, there are different services, but as you'll see today, the foundation for pretty much everything we do in management is predicated on your identity architecture. There are multiple configs, which I'll talk about, that lead to different and variable management services and management value. So really what we want to do is help demystify some of the complexity around your identity architecture relative to what you can do in management and what you can get out of management. So we're going to do an overview of cloud-based identities and the foundational pieces that those connect to from a management standpoint. And then Susan's going to walk us through several demos of what's on the other side of that. The important thing, and we lose the thread on this, I'll admit, occasionally, is what's the value pool? Why does it matter? Why do these modes matter from a value to you and your organization? And that's really what we want to help bring together because of the deep integrated dependencies that identity and management have on one another and the various modes that you can take to get to the cloud future that you hear so much about at these conferences, but we don't necessarily provide the roadmap or the guidebook on how to get there and how to bring these technologies together. So that's really our main focus today.
So to get started, I just want to touch on what are cloud identities. There was a session at noon today where Ramiro and Adjoa covered the basics of cloud identity, particularly with user accounts. And when we're talking through this presentation, we're focused on the cloud identities for our devices. Cloud identities are identities that exist in Azure AD, and because of that, we can use Intune management, and we can take advantage of device-based conditional access policies, which are a great tool for securing our infrastructure regardless of where our users are. So our cloud identities are created in 3 different ways. We have Azure AD registered devices. These are generally our BYOD devices, mobile phones, other devices that are not actually joined to either our Azure AD domain or to our hybrid domain, but we can still do management and conditional access with these devices. Our Azure AD joined devices are going to be born in the cloud, whether that's through Autopilot, through your user taking the steps to automatically join their device to your Azure AD domain. And we also have our hybrid AD joined devices where your device lives both on-prem in your Active Directory environment, but also in the cloud in Azure AD, whether that's through your Azure AD Connect or another tool. The important thing to note as we go through is that cloud identities are not intrinsically tied to a particular cloud management method. Often they get confused, they get conflated that to mean the same thing, but they're tied together but separate as well.
Yeah, and that last point, Susan, is really key because there's, and understandably so, a lot of confusion on can you do, for example, AAD join with config manager or with co-management, or can you do domain join with Intune? And we really want to walk through all those mix and match models, the benefits of those, and how the foundational identity architecture can lead to that management value through our multiple management metaphors of that combination of on-prem and cloud, or in the future cloud only. And that's really what we hope to demystify here. We'll see if we can pull that off because there's some complex terminology at play here. There are a lot of words on this slide, so I'm not going to read these to you. What I want to do is go from the bottom up, and there's actually one missing that is key, and that is existing workstation domain joined. And you could even put new workstation domain join there. So that's where most people either are or started, or that's the foundation of the identity and authentication architecture today. That configuration, just from a what could you, and that's typically it's not a technical link, but it's typically bound to a config manager on-prem managed environment as well. It's typically what we see as config manager and domain join is the pure on-prem surface area. And the other opposite extreme of that would be AAD join and Intune only would be the cloud-only corollary. And then somewhere in the middle is where most people are. And we really want to talk about that middle piece. But what I do want to highlight on the invisible line on this slide that is just domain join is that you still have a path there for management value. And that's one of the first areas that Susan's going to walk through is our Endpoint Analytics service as part of Intune. From a domain join only configuration and a config manager managed configuration, you can still plug your config manager environment into Intune and get Endpoint Analytics without having to make identity changes. You don't need to do AAD join, and you don't need to enroll into Intune. You can get there from here, from that configuration, and I think that gets lost. Our fault that gets lost in the documentation over what you can do from where. But I want to make it super clear that it's really an easy motion, and it's one of our more popular motions. And we have nearly, I want to say, between Intune standalone and this configuration, nearly 45 million clients in that configuration of Windows that are plugged into our cloud that way. Moving up the stack to the bottom one on this slide, on top of the mythical one that I pointed out that doesn't actually exist in Slideware, is the existing workstation configuring hybrid Azure AD join. That's probably the most common config today, and one of the common paths to get to that config is the co-management configuration from Config Manager, attaching that to Intune. I'll say a little bit about this. I assume there's some base knowledge of what I mean when I say co-management. I really want to retire the terms altogether and just talk about cloud attach. But co-management is enrolling your Config Manager managed clients into Intune. So you effectively get the benefits of both management services, and you have the ability to move workloads from one to the other over time, so you can make your transition to the cloud from a management control plane perspective at the course and speed that makes sense for your organization. So that existing workstation, to plug those from, after you've done federation, to plug domain join clients into Azure Active Directory, and then by extension, config manager clients into Intune enrollment, is probably the most common path to a cloud-attached world that we have in terms of our by telemetry and by numbers. Now, new workstation, and we understand why this has to happen, a new workstation into a hybrid Azure AD join is typically following the precedent set by the previous one. So you want your new workstations to be like for like as your existing population, and you enroll those into AD. You do the standard domain join, be that through OS deployment and task sequences, imaging constructs, however you get that configuration, and then by extension, you plug those into cloud identity and cloud management as well as part of that motion. We do have a path through Autopilot, Autopilot being our provisioning service that is can be pre-provisioning or can be user-driven provisioning, whereby the device really morphs itself into a productive and secure device based on the identity. We have a path where you can take the Autopilot provisioning flow and end up in a hybrid Azure AD join state. But there is complexity there around VPN connections, ODJ blobs, things. A lot of stuff has to go right is the best way to put it. It's fully supported. There are preview tags on some of the key scaffolding pieces on that flow today in the hybrid domain join configuration for Autopilot. Those are coming off soon. So it is fully supported. It has a lot of moving parts. So the ideal configuration to bring it all together is the new workstation configured for Azure AD join. From a management perspective, that's specifically the ideal configuration for provisioning, because the Autopilot flow in that configuration isn't dependent on nearly as many moving parts, and you have a lot more flexibility in that flow. You don't have to have your VPN instantiated. You don't have to have network access or line of sight to the domain controller. You just do that pure cloud-based registration to AAD, and by extension, that pure cloud-based enrollment into Intune. And if you still need the config manager service in that configuration, you can do what we call autopilot into co-management, and then have the config manager agent come down and do what it does from a management standpoint. But the hybrid AD join, provisioning into hybrid Azure AD join, while it's supported, it's not our most recommended path because of the complexity that you have to go through to get that to work consistently. And something like provisioning really has to be a high nines, a level of availability, because if it doesn't finish end to end, then the user is stuck calling help desk, or you're starting the process flow all over again. And it's probably 4 times by numbers, 4 times more used, the Azure Active Directory join flow with Autopilot than is the hybrid AD join flow of our massive customers that are using Autopilot for that provisioning phase. So key motivators, I think these are pretty self-evident. The fact that we're here today and we haven't been together for a couple of years speaks to the work reality that we hear talked about a lot, and I'm sure you experience in your organizations. Just that aspect of reach, reaching users that are working on non-corporate networks is a huge benefit that we saw significant growth there. As an example of a key, IT management workflow or Microsoft management solution workflow, take Windows updates. We're moving Windows updates to the Windows Update for Business plus Intune model so that we have better global reach of the app or the update catalog, of the update content. And that doubled in adoption through pandemic, and we expect it's going to double again. So we're getting close to a third of our clients being in that configuration and getting all of their updates from the cloud. And Susan will show some demos on the value pull of that motion through something that's in preview now, drivers and firmware, which is a significant cost driver for IT, and then just Windows updates generally, which making sure your devices are secure and current without all of the heavy lifting of WSUS, config manager, VPN, CMG, et cetera, to make that happen. So that's the key motivators. I think I'm not going to wallow in this, because I think the motivators are clear. The challenges to solve those motivators is the harder part, and so we want to talk about ways to get through those challenges and what the value on the other side of that effort is. You want to take this, or am I taking it?
I'll take it. So as we said, the benefit of having a cloud identity is that it allows us to unlock cloud management, whether that is through co-management, where we still have some of our workloads on-prem managed by our config man server, or we're able to take advantage of Intune only and use Intune for our management, whether that's configuration policies, compliance policies, update for business, whatever workloads we need to move, we have the ability to manage our devices with Intune. This does let us manage our devices regardless of where they are. If your user is working remote from the middle of nowhere and they have internet, they're still managed, they're still safe, and we are able to secure their devices, protect corporate data, and make sure that your users are productive without having to rely on them connecting back to your internal network.
Great, thanks. So again, I think we've made this point, customer reality, there's value to cloud, it's hard to get there, we have too many modes, and we're trying to demystify the modes to let you know what you can get from the easy button and what's going to take some more effort on your behalf. And again, we've spent, again, this is our mistake, we focused too much on the tactics. I think we came out in 2017 and announced co-management, and co-management was really a means to an end, but it became the end. And so we asked all customers to connect for co-management and stop there, and weren't taking the value that we were putting into the cloud. And part of it was our fault by making it harder to get to than it should have been. So we want to reinforce those two things. On the reality is getting to those configurations and what's in it for you and your organization on the other side of those configurations. And then as Susan walks through the demos, I'll highlight the configuration you need to consume that particular set of value that she'll be talking about. So Endpoint Analytics. You've heard a lot about AI and big data in this conference. Endpoint Analytics, which we launched a couple years ago now, is really bringing together all of the signal that we get and applying that to management. You know, it started with things like startup scores, and let you know what the end user experience was on rebooting their devices. We've added things like application health, and we have in other areas that Susan's going to talk about as well. But analytics is the foundation for our the cloud benefits, cloud value that we can bring uniquely together by taking myriad signals into one place and letting you make decisions off of them, and then over time automating the decisions off of those insights. And that's going back to that overly wordy slide that had the different identity configs. That's one you can reach today if you haven't already by simply connecting Config Manager to Intune, and you'll start getting those rich analytics dashboards, actionability, and those types of things that will build the foundation of what Intune becomes in the future, which is driven by these insights, automated by these insights. And that's the foundational implementation we've done to date, and we're continuing to innovate significantly in that area. So you're going to show some demo of the analytics efforts?
Yep, we're going to go ahead and move into the Intune console, where we are going to take a look at what we have available with Endpoint Analytics. The Endpoint Analytics is available under the Reports blade. Once it's enabled, you will have information about your devices start to show up on the overview page. Just from the overview page, we can see that we have our Endpoint Analytics score compared to a baseline. The baseline score is an average of all enterprises, and that's the default one. However, you can also create additional baseline scores based on your metrics, should you want to watch your progress over time. Additionally, we have more information into the score categories. That's a quick overview, as well as the baselines. And on the right-hand side, you can see we have a number of insights and recommendations, which are there to help give you a quick overview of things that you can change, things that might be causing problems in your environment. The great thing about Endpoint Analytics, particularly with our users being remote, is that you no longer have to rely on your user calling and be like, well, my computer is slow, and not being able to see what's going on. So through the Endpoint Analytics data, we can drill in a little bit more. With the Startup Performance tab, we have our core boot score, which is how long it takes your computer to read from power on to the login screen, and then the core sign-in score is from login screen to either desktop or usable desktop. You can see how we compare it to the baseline, and our startup score is actually pretty good. Additionally, we can drill in a little bit further into each phase of our what is contributing to our score. If we had group policy applied to these devices and it was causing a slowdown, we would see it under both the boot score and the sign-in score. We can see if there were changes that could be made if we have hard drives versus solid-state drives in our computers. That's slowing down the timeline. Additionally, at the bottom, we do have score trends, and that gives us insight into how our devices have been performing over time. If you made configuration updates, hardware updates, other changes in your environment, you can see exactly how it has impacted your users over the last 30 days. And then we also have, under Startup Score, we have Restart Frequency. The Restart Frequency tab, if it switches. So under the Restart Frequency tab, we have more insights into what has caused restarts within our environment. So every device restart is logged here. You can see how many per average for the device. We can see if we have a stop error. If that does occur, we do log it, so you can have insight if it's a repeatable error. The long power press when our computers are just unresponsive and you do have to reboot them, or whether we've applied an update or your user has just chosen to restart without being prompted. Again, we have our metrics here, so you can see if we've made changes, if it's caused more blue screens, if it's caused more problems for your end users. Additionally, something we have available for all parts of Endpoint Analytics, we're just going to focus on it under Startup Performance, is the ability to drill into a specific device. So with the device performance, if we could click over to device performance, we will see a list of all the devices in our environment. And here we see all of our devices are checking with Endpoint Analytics. We can see the model, the manufacturer, and their score. And if we click on it, we get more direct insights. We see our startup performance score is 100. We can see what has taken the amount of time, how much time is taken for to reach each stage at each boot. We can also look at the restart history and see if there's been any problems. So when your user calls, my computer's blue screen 17 times today, you can take a minute and look and see whether it's a repeatable cause or if there's something else going on with the machine without having to physically be there. Also available within Endpoint Analytics, we have the Application Reliability tab, which we will switch to in a second. The Application Reliability tab is going to give us a high-level overview of the applications that are within our environment and how productive, or how they are influencing our users' productivity. So, under Application Reliability, we can see that we have the top apps that are causing issues within our environment over the last 14 days. What you'll note is that every app here has 5 devices active. This means that we aren't having a single app crashing repeatedly on a single device, spiking and causing concern on this overview page. It's going to show what is really causing issues over our entire environment for multiple users. If we click on a app name, we do have more insight into what's going on. We can also see if our device or our configuration for that app is performing at a lower level or higher level than other app configurations for other companies. So this lets us know if we maybe have a bad app config. Additionally, clicking on the app, we can see that we have multiple versions in the environment, and we see that this one version has crashed 15 times. So we might want to take proactive action and go look and see if there's a new version, see if we've done something with config, or what else we need to do to make sure that this is not impacting our users any further. So finally, we do have the work from home, or work from anywhere blade as well. This is going to cover just 4 main points to kind of give you an idea of where your users are. It's Windows, which is whether your Windows versions are supported. Cloud identity, is your device hybrid or AAD joined? Cloud management, is it managed by Windows through, or managed by Intune, either co-managed or natively? And cloud provisioning, is it enrolled with Autopilot and have a profile, or is it a cloud PC?
Anything else? That was a lot. Thank you.
We actually have one more thing.
We had to do the just one more thing.
One more thing for Endpoint Analytics. We've been asked constantly if we can show, I didn't go forward. If we can have more information about slicing our devices and slicing our Endpoint Analytics. So you see something slightly different here versus my previous recording, which is that we have a device scope available. So device scope will be added, and it's part of the slicing feature. So this will allow us to look at a specific subset of our devices in Endpoint Analytics and take actions on those. Going through into the device scope, we can set up multiple scopes, but only 5 can be active at any time. In this example, we have 4 regional scopes as well as our early adopters group. So once these scopes are enabled, what it does is on the back end start enabling and collecting and slicing that data to make it available so that you have the analytics on just that subset of devices. You can, obviously, as I said, you can have more than 5, but 5 can be active at any point. So once they're active, we come back in, we can change our device scope over to our early adopters group and look and see what effect our recent changes have had versus the overall infrastructure. So here you can see we've had some changes made. Our users, if we had to introduce a problem, we'd be aware of it before we roll it out to a wider group. And if we go into the other portions of the blade, we will see that the early adopters group scope does carry through automatically and slice the data down to what we care about.
Anything else?
Nope.
So, I think I'm going to stress about that, and really cool stuff. Thanks, Susan. Is that is part of your E3 entitlement. That is part of that connecting config manager to Intune, and these insights start to show up. without having to do any heavy lifting on identity federation or AED join. This is one of the lowest friction motions we have to get value from the cloud with what you're already paying for today, and with low friction in terms of change control management or risk management, because it really is it's just putting connective tissue over that device that that's enrolled or configured or managed by Configuration Manager, but you're sending that data up for forensics up into the Intune service, and that's what allows us to broaden that lens of the Intune, of the telemetry we get on the Intune service, to show you those industry relative details, which obviously you couldn't do on-prem because your data set is boxed into your organization. So that's one that, if you haven't already, strongly encourage to kick the tires on. You own it. It's easy to get to, and as Susan pointed out, there's a lot of good stuff in there. We're continuing to evolve that. The slicing aspect was something that's been asked for a long time, to really be able to surgically tailor those groups. No pun on your last name intended on that. So that's just something that we wanted to start with, because that's a low friction way to really maximize the value of a combination of on-prem and cloud. Now, proactive remediations is the kind of the next step up from the insights. This is where you can stop those help desk calls before they become calls. It's a detect and remediate engine that is built into Intune, and this is the first step where you do require enrollment, because it's the Intune service actually delivering and managing and the authoring experience for these proactive remediations. There are a number of examples. I think I'll let you maybe talk about some of the examples of what people have used proactive remediations for.
Sure. We see our customers taking advantage of proactive remediations in all sorts of ways. Anything you can script, you probably figure out how to do it. Whether it's fixing a VPN issue on your client, updating your sales group policies, or doing something like cleaning disk space. If you still have a phone system that dumps your WAV files into a folder, that causes help desk calls. Easy way to have a proactive remediation, just to go and clean those out. So we actually have an example of setting up a proactive remediation on the next slide. So one more. So proactive remediations is available in the Endpoint Analytics blade. And in order to set up a proactive remediation, we need two things. We need a detection script, and we need a remediation script. There are some samples available in our docs, and there are plenty of people have done the work to figure out the best way to do this. So what we're going to do is, I have a couple of scripts I've already created. You can see here I have a detection script to detect an expired user start from a given certificate authority. And then I also have a separate remediation script. So those are just saved on my computer. So from here, I can come into the Intune console and set up my proactive remediation. So I'm just going to click Create Script Package. And from here, I am prompted just to set up a normal profile with a normal name. If I have a publisher I want to add, I can add it here. Additionally, at this point, I pick my detection script, so it's just finding the file. And once I select my file, you'll see the contents of my script are added and available, so you can double check and make sure you have the right one. We'll do the same thing with our remediation script. And here, for this script, we will want to make sure that we're running it in our logged on user credentials. So we're going to go ahead and toggle that to yes, but we're not going to change the script signature check or running the script in 64-bit PowerShell, but you do have that option. From that point, it is just a matter of the same scope tags and assignments that you're used to when you create a normal profile. So we create our normal profile. And at this point, you can see that our proactive remediation has been created and successfully assigned. And when we refresh it, we'll see it in our list, as well as that it's active. As devices check in and get the policy and need to be fixed, you'll see that they either don't have issues, they've had an issue and they were fixed, and if they recur again. So if you have a problem recurring over and over, you can be aware of it and look at what's causing that problem.
Great. And we'll move into device compliance. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so device compliance is a really powerful tool as we're talking about remote work. We know that your users could be accessing data from anywhere, whether it's grandma's kitchen table computer or their laptop or something else. So it may not be a work machine, but we do want to make sure that your company data is secure no matter what. Within Intune, we do have the ability to create compliance policies. And we could do things like require BitLocker, require firewall settings, password length, threat defense settings. And these compliance settings allow us to update the compliance setting with Azure AD, and that unlocks conditional access, which is a really powerful tool if you're not already using it. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, so this is where, again, going back to the theme of what config you need to unlock the value. And we walk through Endpoint Analytics, which is that pure connector, no dependency on identity. Proactive Remediations has that dependency on identity because it requires that Intune enrollment, and those two are synonymous in this case. And then we get into compliance policy and conditional access. These are the two services really working together, whereas the compliance authority for the device, the compliance configuration entity for the device is on the management side, and then the authentication piece that I'm oversimplifying, but the kind of that no-go auth experience for resource access or conditional access is gated by that identity. So this is where the services really start to merge, and this configuration can be achieved, or this value can be obtained by a pure AAD join and Intune standalone, or by hybrid AD join and co-management. And this is our most common workload. And we talk about workloads, we talk about several key IT functions and services that are delivered through management, such as application delivery, Windows updates, security, and conditional access policy. This is the most common workload that hybrid joined and co-managed clients or customers move over, because it's optimized for that cloud control plane and optimized for ZTN. So this is where we start to see that convergence of identity and management into providing a service that's very unique in this space.
And while we do have a number of settings natively in Intune and compliance policy, we also have introduced the ability to create a custom compliance policy, which lets you further extend your compliance settings to make sure your device really meets your security requirements before they access data.
That's a great point. And what you'll see a lot of our partners taking advantage of this. Whatever your OEM of choice is, that's a common path that they're using now for customization of compliance policies that are native to their particular hardware, maybe a UEFI or BIOS config that's unique to a hardware type that they have. So it's really expanding the ecosystem, what compliance means. It's not just the limited set of settings we might have, but it's things that you might build on your own, or things that partners might provide or OEMs might provide. So it really is expanding that ecosystem of compliance and access. And walk us through creating a policy.
We're going to go ahead and create a policy. If you're not familiar with creating a compliance policy in Intune, you can get to it under devices. You can also get to it under endpoint security. Before we can create a custom compliance policy, we do need two things. We do need a script, and we're going to need to upload that script into Intune. We'll also need a JSON file that contains our configuration. So I have already pre-created my script. And so the first thing we'll do is, under compliance policies, we can go to scripts, and we can add a script for Windows 10 or later. Once we create our profile, and we'll be taken where we can paste in the contents of our detection script. We're just looking for a TPM value here. We can run the script again as logged in user credentials, enforce signature check, or again, run in 64-bit. So once we've created our script is going to be available, and at this point, we can go ahead and create our compliance policy that has a custom compliance setting in it. Again, the policies are available under devices. They're also going to be available under the endpoint security blade. So we're going to create our custom compliance policy. And you can see we do have device health, device properties, the other settings that I did call out as being our normal built-in compliance policies. But we do have custom compliance at the top. If we open that, we can require it. We can pick our detection script from our script library. And then also, we're going to upload our JSON file. So once we select our JSON file, you can see I've already created it. I have it ready to go. It includes the settings I'm looking for, the values I'm looking for. And then we do have the remediation strings. And that is going to be made available to your end user in the company portal, should their device not meet this compliance setting and they're looking for more information as to why they aren't able to access the company resources. So we go ahead and pick our JSON file. And once we've uploaded, or once we've selected it, you will see it available. It does do validation. So it will call out if you have any errors here, so you won't be able to save it if your JSON is malformed. At this point, it's just creating a normal policy. We go ahead and assign it, mark actions for non-compliance, and at that point, it will be using your calculations for your device, so you may see your devices go non-compliant if they don't meet your additional settings.
All right, so Windows Update for Business. Now we're getting into the part of the program where you're actually transitioning manageability of those key workflows that I mentioned earlier from an on-prem control plane to a cloud-based control plane. Windows Update for Business is our most adopted transitional workload. Compliance policies and conditional access are our most adopted workload, but there's not really a strong corollary to those in the on-prem world. So that's a little bit of an outlier from an adoption a number of adopters of that particular workload. Windows Update for Business, like I mentioned earlier, has been our top growing one. It really hockey sticked up during pandemic because of the reachability of users and the evolution of Windows Update for Business and Intune as the control plane. Now, we'll admit when we started our Windows Update for Business journey, the controls were limited. It was a complicated set of policies had to be applied. With the integration we've done with that team and brought Windows Update for Business together as both a service and the management control plane through Intune, it's really evolving as giving you the control that you need, but the reach that you require. Windows Update is a globally placed service, so the content, the scan catalogs are always proximate to the user that are reaching out to get them. A line of sight to the internet is all you need to actually reach the service, be that the management service of Intune or the Windows Update for Business service from which they're pulling the updates of the content, the catalog, the scan logic, things like that. And bringing those together into a way that you have the control that you need for, say, deferrals or expedited updates, which we're going to talk about, like Update Now. Those were key gaps in previous models that we had because you didn't have that precision control. Now that we brought those together and you get the same level of control that you were getting from on-prem Config Manager WSUS configuration, almost think of Intune and Windows Update as being the cloud metaphor for the same thing, giving you the control that you need, but the reach that you require as well. We continue to evolve this. We have intelligence in the scan process. We're adding, which we'll talk a little bit about as well, adding drivers and firmware. I'll talk about that in a section focused on that. But instead of blabbing further, maybe just show an example from a demo. Expedited Updates is a good example of that do it now control that we've added that was missing before.
Yeah, so we know that sometimes there are day zero patches that you need deployed to your users, and we know that you cannot count on your users connecting to your on-prem network, to your VPN, anything like that to ensure that they get the update in a timely manner. So we do have the ability to deliver quality updates, only quality updates, via an expedited process. It is available under the Devices tab. And the things to know about expedited quality updates is that it does ignore your deferral period, so they could have user impact. Obviously, there is a trade-off. For security, you want that device updated, you want to make sure that everything is secure. However, your user will be forced to reboot. If we create a new profile, you'll see we can set up a single profile. We're not setting up rings. We're not setting up any specifics. We're creating a single profile. We are choosing what set of updates we want to expedite. In this case, we're going to select the most recent ones from this last Tuesday. So any devices that are below that patch level will be forced to update within the next, and reboot within the next day or whatever we select in the second level. Again, user impact.
Yeah, that's. This is one of the more popular use cases for cloud-based updates. Even at Microsoft, we've had to pull the emergency button on occasion, given the vulnerability or the impact of a vulnerability. And at times like that, you can still give a little bit of a gap for the end user impact, but really you're optimizing for security versus end user at that point, just out of necessity. And we used to be bound by check-in times and regular check-in frequencies until you could get that update out there. So even setting that to 0, do it now, wasn't really now. It was now on a time when the service thought it was now, or the client thought it was now based on check-in. This is actually get the update out there, get it applied, get this vulnerability mitigated, and move on. So that's been a big enhancement that's really popular with the folks that have moved their control plane of updates to the cloud. And I think let's see our time. We're clicking away. Let me back up a little bit here. I want to touch on drivers and firmware. I won't talk too much about it. I want Susan to show the demo. But this is in preview now. This is a huge task for organizations to curate drivers, stay on top of driver vulnerabilities. And with this model, with the direct publishing model of OEMs and partners to our Windows Update service and embedding those in the scan catalog directly, there's no more packaging of drivers. There's no more curation of drivers. You can trust the drivers. Well, you can trust and verify the drivers that are published to Windows Update with the same level of control I talked about for broader quality and feature updates. So you get the levers that you need to not just blast the driver updates out, but you also get the ability to have a curated set of drivers in the Windows Update service as published by OEMs. And we're partnering very closely with all the OEMs to assure the latest drivers are up there, but also giving you the controls that you need to effectively manage when the drivers go out and to whom they go out to. So quick demo on that.
So when we create a profile to deploy our drivers, we have two options. We can either decide to automatically deploy our drivers to, once they're available, we can set a deferral period, whether it's 1 day, 5 days, 7 days, so that a new driver is detected, and after a given number of days, it's available. We can also manually approve and deploy our driver updates. So we have the two options here. And then here's the deferral period. It can take some time for this to show up, so we do have some that are already pre-created, and we can see what they look like. So this is a list of our driver updates that we've created. At a glance, you can quickly see that our demo driver policy has a driver that's available for review. This really calls out that you have something to look at. You don't need to take the time drilling into each of your policies to see if anything has changed. Once we click on that, we can actually go in. We can see our recommended driver that has been made available. We see more information about the driver, and we see that it needs review. Additionally, so under recommended drivers, these are drivers that Windows Update has found available for devices that are in the device group that this policy is assigned to. You don't need to sort out which driver is the right driver for your devices. It's only going to show drivers that are applicable to devices that this is assigned to. Additionally, under other drivers, you'll have maybe older drivers, older options, firmware updates, things like that.
Great, thank you. And the last piece, at the close, I think it's our last piece, and it's going to have to be our last piece because there's 2.5 minutes left. So we've made huge strides in the store and making a number of store-based announcements. At this conference, we just entered private preview for store connection between Intune and the WinGit or Windows Package Manager store. Which the big thing here, it's kind of buried the lead in this slideware, but it's inclusive of Win32 apps. The detriment of the Microsoft Store for Business was always the app format, the UWP or even MSIX, because the app publishers or app vendors weren't repackaging their apps into those formats in a way that commercial organizations could consume those pragmatically for your business needs. So with the new WinGit-based store and the integration into Intune, the app experience for Windows becomes very analogous to the app experience for Apple and Google, where we connect directly to their stores, where we basically have a pointer, a WinGit pointer to the app content that lives in the store, but the command and control of the targeting, who you're targeting for that particular app, the supersedence model, the upgrade model, that's all Intune metaphors. So the store is the warehouse, and in this model, Intune is the delivery truck that's going to the address that you specify at the time you specify, delivering the packages or the new version of a package to the endpoints, but it's all based on the store repo. And we're basically using the WinGit as it exists in the client to do that orchestration of pulling the content and orchestrating the install. Additionally, the apps published to this new store have all the metadata you need, like the command line switches, the description of the app, so you don't have to do any of that manually anymore. And it's always going to be the latest version published to that store. There'll be an N- structure as well, so it's not like you're always going to get the latest version, but it's a way to stay on top of the wild west of the Win32 app ecosystem. in a way that has really been a heavy IT tax to date, where it's self-curation, monitoring vulnerabilities of applications that are important to your organization, your LOB applications that you have to manage separately, and then converging those into a content source that Config Manager then redistributes around the world. And then when you need to update it again, you got to go through that flow again. This is really meant to simplify that whole flow, but the key point of that is it's supportive of Win32 apps. I think you're going to show the browse function here in 8 seconds. Yeah.
And I do believe there's actually a separate breakout session that's available streaming that will have this content. Just real quickly, in our normal apps blade, if we do go to add an app type, we now have a Microsoft Store repository. You can search the store repository just like you do with the Apple or managed Google Play stores. We can find our Office app, and once we select it, we do see that it has pre-populated all of the information. And from there, we can assign it as normal.
Yeah. So timer just went off. I think that we got through everything. Summary. There are low friction ways to cloud attach, and then there are ways to get a little bit more friction, but the value is the pull through. Hopefully we showed the value. Hopefully we tied it better together with what your identity configuration needs to look like to attain the management value that we talked about here. Thanks, Susan, for all the great demos and covering a lot of the key areas that really make up that package of value for why it matters to go cloud attach and what it takes to get there. So thank you all.